Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about using custom base images for Docker images that are produced using Rules Docker and the Bazel ecosystem. So we're going to be working in this multi-language Bazel monorepo repository. This is actually going to be the 11th video in this series. If you're interested in any of the previous videos, you can go through them. But basically we have this Bazel monorepo that has various different languages in it where Docker images are built and other nice things like that. So today we're going to be working on switching out the default base image that's used whenever we build Docker images. Let's just give a little bit of an overview first of all. So we have this monorepo with different projects that use different languages. Today we're going to be working in the Go web application, and we already have a Go image being produced, as you can see here. So we can actually build this. We could do a Bazel run, and we want to run that Go web image target, and when we do this, this is going to build a Docker image, and we can run that using docker run and the image name, and this will start our web service that's using mux underneath. So we have this Docker image being produced, but as you can see here, we aren't actually defining any base image for this Docker image, which is kind of strange. But if we look over at Rules Docker, we can kind of understand why. So in Rules Docker, if we go inside the Go directory and we look at image.bzl, we can see here that what's actually happening here is a bunch of base images are being pulled. So if we don't define a base image for our Docker image target, it's going to use one of these depending on if we pass in another parameter, like if we want to use a debug image, which includes a little bit more than the standard image. But by default it's using this distroless base image for Go, which is kind of nice because the purpose of this distroless base image is that it doesn't contain very much. If we look here in the repository, we can see that these images only contain your application and its runtime dependencies. This is nice for a couple of reasons. For example, when it comes to vulnerabilities and things, this image won't be at risk as much because there isn't so much there. Like even when it comes to OS dependencies, it's very light, so it's not as at risk for vulnerabilities. So it's nice that by default Rules Docker uses these distroless base images, but perhaps we don't want to use this for some reason. We want to use another image that's coming from Dockerhub. So if you were actually building a Dockerfile, if you're following a tutorial to build a Dockerfile and build a Docker image, you would use, you would probably start it off with from Golang, and you would pick a base image here to build your Docker image from. So we're going to kind of be able to do something similar here, and we want to use one of these Golang images as our base image instead of the distroless one that is used by default. So to do that, in our Bazel workspace, we need to use a container pull rule to pull the image down. So we can see kind of an example of that here. We're going to do that. So in our workspace file, we are going to go down here where we're already doing some Docker stuff, and we're going to use container pull to pull in an image. So in this section you can actually see it's pulling down some base images here using this. So this was the purpose of this. So in the future we might actually need this if we decide to use a different image that we're going to pull from Dockerhub. So we're going to give this a better name. Let's just call it Go base image. And the registry isn't going to be gcr.io. The registry is actually going to be registry.dockerhub.hub.docker.com. So now we need to find a repository and a tag or a digest. So let's go over to Dockerhub now, and let's look here at the tags. So first of all, we are using Go 1.18. Let's just go with .8. And we want an Alpine image. So here is the images for Go 1.18 Alpine. So let's just choose one of these. Let's go here and let's use this tag. So I'm going to talk about digest in a second, but first of all, let's just use tag. And let's do this. And the repository isn't distroless Java, it's library Golang. This is where the Golang images are coming from. So we're going to use this 1.18.8 Alpine 3.16 tag from this repository. So now that we have this Go base image defined here and we're pulling it in, then all we actually need to do is in our Go image target, we're going to define the base and we're going to use that. So first of all, let's just discuss something about distroless. So if I was to run this again, and if I was to do a docker ps and see what's running, I can see that our image is running, so we can do a docker exec, and we can try to exec into this container using bin.sh. But because this is a distroless image, it actually doesn't include shell, so we can't actually exec into that. So if we actually use the base image of Go base image, we stop this and we rebuild our Docker image. This is going to take a minute because it needs to pull it. What's happening here? So I actually made a mistake here. When it comes to this here is actually defining a new repository. So if I was to do a Bazel query, I can do a Bazel query at that and see what's here. So now it's actually going to pull the image and we can see what's underneath here. But basically what we need to do is we need to use at go base image / image. So it's going to be the image target. And we should see here now that we have this thing here. So it's the default image target in the image package. So now if I try to rebuild the image, it should work this time. So that image is actually built now. It's using the same Docker image name as before. So we can do a docker run. This time when it's running, it's actually using this base image that we're pulling in. And this base image does actually include shell. So we can do something like docker ps and we can do the docker exec again. And we should be able to actually exec in using shell. And you can see now that we're actually inside. This is cool. We've actually been able to swap out the base image this easily just by adding this base and pulling in the image that we want. So that's kind of nice. One other thing here, just when we were talking about distroless, let's actually do a little experiment here. If I minimize this, you can see that we have this image that's running, and it's this container running, it's using this image. If we look at this image, it is actually Go web. It's actually 335 megabytes large, so it's pretty big, as you'd expect. If we move to use the distroless instead, and we rebuild that, this time it's actually only 26 MB, so it's less than 10% of the size when the distroless image is used. So I'm not recommending that you use a different base image or whatever, but this is just to show you that it's possible, because the distroless one works very well. But if you have some other requirements, you might need to use a different base image. So this is kind of the first part. We are pulling a base image from Dockerhub and we're going to use that. But what if we actually want to write our own Dockerfile? So we want to override an image that's from Dockerhub and we want to kind of customize it. So inside Go Web, we're going to create a new file. It's going to be a Dockerfile. And this Dockerfile, we're actually going to use the same base image that we were pulling in before. I think it's the same. 118.8 Alpine 3.16, 118.8 Alpine 3.16. So we're going to use the same base image as before, but we're going to write a file to the file system under the TMP directory. And this is just going to allow us to identify this image. So once it's running, we're going to be able to see that we are actually using this base image that we've defined ourselves. So now how do we actually use this as our base image. So this part actually isn't very well documented over here in Rules Docker, and I'm not sure why. But if we do a search for Dockerfile image, you can see that when we look through here, we can see that some of the build files do use this, and in the testing workspace, this rule is used, and in the Bazel file, they have some comments about this, but there's actually no markdown or no documentation about this, which is kind of weird. But I'm going to show you how to use it now. So in our workspace, we need to add something else here. So underneath where we're pulling this base image from Dockerhub, we are going to load this rule called Dockerfile image, and then we're going to use this rule. We're going to just call the target custom go web Dockerfile, and the Dockerfile is going to be this is going to point to the Dockerfile that we just created. So it's going under projects, go web, Dockerfile. So it's pointing to this file. So that's all we need in our workspace file. Then in the build file, we're going to add another go image target, and this target is going to use the custom image that we're defining. So let's actually just copy this. Let's call it go web image custom base, and the binary is going to be the same. The base though is going to be something different. So it's going to use something called container image, and if we go to rules docker, this part actually is documented. This is what you would use if you are pulling in an image. I guess we're actually already doing it. We should already be doing that in our workspace, I guess. Container pull. No, it's slightly different from this actually. So this is pulling in an image. We're going to use container image to build an image. And let's see, it should be documented. Yeah, okay. So we're going to use container image. Let's just put that above here, and we're going to call the image custom go web base image, and we don't need any of this, but the base we're going to provide is going to be the custom go web Docker file, and we're going to use image. And there's a target under this image package called Dockerfile image.tar. So let's just explain what's happening here. So in our workspace file, we are loading the Dockerfile image rule, and then we're using that rule to build a Docker image from a Docker file. And this is one thing I'm kind of curious about, that you can't use this rule and this target from a build file. I don't exactly know the details about that, but this needs to be in the workspace, which is kind of annoying. It would be nice to put that along with your package here. But what this is going to do is it's actually going to build a Dockerfile image from this Docker file that we have defined ourselves. Then in the build file, we are going to use a container image, and this container image is going to build a container image using this that we've defined in our workspace. It's going to use the tar that's produced by that to create the image. So then from that, in our new go image target, we're able to use that, and it's just going to be the target like this. So I think that is all in order now. And now when we're running a Bazel run command, we have a second target. So this isn't go web image, this is go web image. It's custom. Oh, sorry. It's go web image custom base. So we're going to build this image. Something is a little bit off here. Oh, container image is not defined, so we need to bring that in. Another kind of annoying thing here about their docs is that they don't always show the load statements. So I should have the load statement over here. So we're going to load in the container image like that, container image rule, and then we're going to use it to build our base. So now this should work. It's going to build our Docker image. And if you remember in the Dockerfile, the way that we're going to identify that this base image is used is that there should be this hello.txt file written to temp. So now if I do a Bazel or a Docker run, and it is go web image, is that right? Go web image custom base. So we actually want to run the go web image custom base. So this is going to build our Docker image. So now we have two targets. We have the go web image, which is using a base image that's coming from Dockerhub, and we also have this go web image custom base, which is using a base image that we've built ourselves using this Dockerfile. So now I can do a Docker run, and we have this custom base tag. So that's running now on localhost 8080. If I do a docker ps, I can see what's running. So we have this, and we want to do a docker exec. And once we go inside, if I do an lstmp, we can see we have this hello.txt file, and if I cat that, you can see it has hello world. So we know that this base image is being used. So that's kind of everything. We've went through a lot here in this video. We discussed about what rules Docker uses as the default base images. We also discussed how to use a base image from Dockerhub instead of the default one, the default distroless one. And we also discussed how to use a Docker base image that you define yourself and build it and use it as a base image. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.